people of the internet, this is Kaiju Noir here with another installment of Viewer Request. Today's subject is actually something I've had my eyes on for quite some time, that being the 1966 fantasy film The Magic Serpent, brought to us by the people at Toei, the same studio that would go on to create Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, and a multitude of other properties. Back when I was working on my retrospective on Godzilla ripoffs, I had one point thought about including this film. However, I eventually dropped it from the list when it looked like it was going to be more than your standard giant monster flick. Having seen it at last, I can say that I made the right decision, as it does more than enough to differentiate itself from the rest. So what exactly is The Magic Serpent about? Well, the film is an adaptation of the famous Japanese folktale of Jiraiya, a magic-wielding ninja that protected the land from the evil Orochimaru with the help of his giant toads and his romantic interest, Tsunade. Over the last 100 years, the story has been adapted and referenced numerous times across all forms of media. Some of the most recent incarnations include the characters from Naruto, as well as the Black Kakurenja. As a side note, it's interesting to point out that before 1966, most versions of Jiraiya would feature his frogs being roughly the size of a man. So it's possible that the giant monsters depicted in The Magic Serpent had a large influence on future versions of the characters and his amphibious allies. Now it's time to finally check out one of the most ambitious, and possibly most influential, retellings of this legendary tale. The film takes place in feudal Japan, where a village is under attack by an army of ninjas. It is revealed before Lord Ogata and his wife that the mastermind behind this invasion was none other than its corrupt general, Yuki Daijo, shortly before being slaughtered by him. Lord Ogata's men escaped the city with his son Ikazuchimaru before being attacked by a giant serpentine dragon who is actually the powerful ninja Orochimaru, Yuki Daijo's greatest ally. However, before he can kill Ikazuchimaru, he is rescued at the last minute by a giant bird that whisks him away to a secluded area in the mountains. It is here where he is raised by an old hermit named Dojin Hiki, who teaches him the ways of ninjutsu and toad magic for the next 10 years. Eventually, Orochimaru and his men track Ikazuchimaru down and kill Dojin Hiki, who was actually his former mentor. In his last breath, Dojin Hiki reveals to Ikazuchimaru his true origins and the evil deeds committed against his parents, as well as his land. Under the moniker of Jiraiya, Ikazuchimaru now seeks vengeance as he sets out to kill Yuki Daijo and put a stop to Orochimaru. As I was watching this film, I couldn't help but compare it to Orochi the Eight-Headed Dragon, another Japanese fantasy film that was an adaptation of an old folktale. Both films feature powerful protagonists that are trained to be magical warriors and meet love interests that eventually help them overcome snake-themed villains. While the plot to The Magic Serpent is just as basic, if not more so than Orochi the Eight-Headed Dragon, it manages to pack a lot of energy and charm into both its characters and the world. Unlike Yamato Takeru, who always came off as boring and overpowered, Jiraiya feels very relatable as a man with a strong thirst for vengeance and an amusingly dark sense of humor. While he is also ridiculously powerful, the writing still manages to throw many challenges at him that really put his skills to the test. On top of that, the film also throws a huge moral dilemma onto Tsunade's lap halfway through the film. Early on, she joins Jiraiya on his quest so that she may find her missing father, who may be in the same city that Jiraiya wishes to liberate. However, once she finds out who her father is, she is then torn between her familial loyalty to her father and to the people she cares about. The main antagonist, Orochimaru, is an equally entertaining villain. Though he works under Yuki Daijo, he's constantly coming up with schemes to ascend to a higher power through dirty tricks and taking advantage of the people around him. Very similar to Starscream from the Transformers franchise, only with a lot more resources at his disposal. The action itself is very imaginative and surprisingly more violent than I predicted. As with most stories that pertain to magical ninjas, this film's got 'em all. From feats of superhuman strength, to magic spells that summon creatures and illusions, to insane speeds that borderline on being straight-up teleportation. The effects on display are quite serviceable for the time, especially the sequence where Jiraiya is attacked by several floating doors in an enclosed environment. The only effects that felt off were the blue screen speed lines that were probably used in an attempt to copy the technique that Japanese animators would use to convey intense speed. The one thing that felt odd about the violence, though, was that while the film was never afraid to show on-screen death, the bodies were often left bloodless 90% of the time. As for Jiraiya and Orochimaru's respective giant toad and dragon forms, the filmmakers managed to accomplish what few Japanese monster films rarely could, in that they were able to create monster suits that don't feel limited to the human form. The dragon has a very elongated and slender appearance, without looking cumbersome for the suit actor. while the Toad has a very squat and wide body that never folds inwards, nor do you notice the suit actor's legs that often. As for the designs of the two monsters, it looks as though the suit makers were going for an art direction that mimicked the style of feudal Japanese paintings, which I find to be a really unique approach. On top of that, what few models are presented here are well detailed, do a great job at hiding the flaws in the suits, such as the aforementioned legs, and look astounding in wide shots. The only disappointment I had with the climax was the giant spider that Tsunade summons to aid Jiraiya, which is a stiff puppet that doesn't so much move as it does float in midair and occasionally dangle its legs when it's spewing its web. A far cry from Kumonga from the Godzilla series, which ironically made its first appearance a year after this movie. When it comes right down to it, The Magic Serpent is a highly entertaining film that's full of spectacle, personality, and a creative use of tokusatsu effects. If you've already seen Daimajin and wanted a less dramatic and more over-the-top Japanese fantasy film, then look no further. I'm giving The Magic Serpent a 4 out of 5. Unfortunately, its availability in the West is very limited. All that exists so far is a widescreen English dub on VHS, as well as a public domain pan and scan cut on DVD. The most available version of the movie that I've seen is usually placed in a 2-pack with the public domain version of Gamera vs. Gauss. If you really want to add this film to your Japanese monster movie collection, I suggest looking for it on third-party websites, as it's definitely worth owning. For those of you who have been following my channel since the very beginning, you probably know what site I generally recommend. Until next time everybody, take care.